Greetings, and welcome to A Year of Movies, a Planet Geek production. For this project, we are using the Ivan Walters reference book of 365 films to watch on the day they happened. Each day, we watch a movie associated with the date we are watching it on. And as it is the 30th of April, we are going to be watching Great Expectations from 1946, directed by David Lean and starring John Mills. So to begin with, yes, I am aware of the Dickens story of Great Expectations. Have I seen any version of this in the movies? No, I have not. So, as this would be a first watch for me. And as I had just mentioned, that it does star John Mills, as well as Gene Simmons, Valerie Hobson, Martita Hunt, Bingley Currie, Francis L. Sullivan, Bernard Mills, Alec Guinness, and Anthony Wager. So at its base, the movie follows Pip, who is John Mills, who is a humble orphan boy growing up in the early 19th century in the Kent Marshes. And while he's always dreaming of a better life, his world does start to change with a chance encounter in a graveyard, and a mysterious opportunity takes him from his modest roots with his blacksmith brother-in-law, as seeing that both of his parents have passed, that he's been raised by his older sister. And then he's brought into the bustling society of London, where he strives to become a gentleman. The entire cast does a fantastic job of bringing the Charles Dickens world to life on this atmospheric black and white with fantastic cinematography, and just a masterful blend of like drama and humor and just emotional depths. There's some really cool uses of camera effects, like in-camera effects, to show off the scenery and the atmosphere. A lot of sequences take place in like fog-like weather. There's a really amazing sequence that happens out on actual water, which is kind of a neat thing. The sequence split between rear screen projection and then actual in-water performances and all that sort of thing. It's really a great discovery as the first version of this particular story, which has been told several times. There's a movie prior to it, and there's quite a few after, including both theatrical and television versions of the Great Expectations story. At one point, Pip becomes quite ill, and then eventually wakes up from it on April 30th. Now, we don't actually have a year set into this. While Dickens had stated that this is a 19th century story, he actually does not give an actual year to this, so we're just roughly going on that. But we do know, like I said, it's April 30th, and that happens about an hour and 50 minutes into this 1 hour and 58-minute movie. And when it came to the Academy Awards for that particular year, it ended up winning for Best Set Direction, Black and White, and Best Cinematography, Black and White. It also got nominated for Best Director, Best Picture, and Best Screenplay. And as it is May 1st, we are going to be watching Four Weddings and a Funeral from 1994, directed by Mike Newell and starring Hugh Grant. So this was a movie that, while it was quite notable in the theaters at the time, I didn't actually get around to seeing this movie till it was well onto either VHS or maybe even those early days of the Canadian HBO, the Super Channel, or First Choice, whichever it was. I do remember seeing this movie, and it is one that I have watched several times throughout the years. That being said, like I had already mentioned, that not only does this movie star Hugh Grant, but it also stars Andy McDowell, Kristen Scott, Thomas, Simon Cowell, James Fleet, Rowan Atkinson, John Hannah, David Bauer, and Anna Chancellor. So this is one of those type of movies that I really enjoy. We have a great ensemble cast, and it's a bunch of just character actors doing fantastic work throughout the whole entire thing. This movie is a very a light movie to watch, especially after the previous few days of some tougher than normal watches. But it's always nice to revisit this lighthearted comedy that has a fantastic reveal of some of the greatest visual looks and sounds of the late 80s, early 90s. It's just a wonderful thing to look back on and reflect. And of course, as the movie does state, this movie takes place over a period of time where we experience this group of friends headed by Charles, who is Hugh Grant, as they basically come together through 3 weddings and a funeral. We have a lot of fantastic, lighthearted comedy coming throughout. We have some really fun character actors doing fantastic work, like I said earlier. Hugh Grant is doing his charmingly best, and Annie McDowell plays this great sort of almost femme fatale character that hops in and out of Charles's life throughout the process of the movie. To be quite honest, there's not really much more to say about this movie other than it is a very enjoyable watch at any time that you're seeing it. And to begin with, at the very start of this movie, we start off seeing an invitation that is actually taking place as the very first wedding in the movie happens on May the 1st, 1993. Like I said, that's within the first minute of this 1 hour and 57-minute movie. And when it came to the Academy Awards for that particular year, it actually ended up getting nominations for Best Picture and Best Original Screenplay. And as it is the 2nd of May, we are going to be watching Young Frankenstein from 1974, directed by Mel Brooks and starring Gene Wilder. So to begin with, it's kind of exciting for me to be able to watch this movie for this project because this is my 3rd favorite movie of all time. Knowing that my 1st and 2nd movies are not on this list to begin with, I'm really excited to be talking about this particular movie. Now, when it comes to this, my parents are big fans of not only the classic Universal Monsters, which is what I was also was shown early on in my beginning to love movies, but they were also Mel Brooks fans. And again, that is also reflected in the type of movies that I also grew up enjoying. This particular movie, however, was probably first seen on television through the Saturday Night Movies on TVO with host Yuli Yost. And I do remember vaguely, because of the documentary style that that series has, that there were interviews with Gene Wilder and Mel Brooks, and I even think like Marty Feldman was part of it, talking about the movie and all that. And they had a couple of other people talking about the movie and how it was so beautifully linked to the original Frankenstein. So that being said, I've seen this movie several times. I own it on DVD and have watched it constantly throughout my life. And like I said, my 3rd favorite film of all time. And on that list, it's my favorite comedy of all time. And like I had just previously mentioned, not only does this movie star Gene Wilder, but it also stars Marty Feldman, Peter Boyle, Terry Garr, Cloris Leachman, Madeline Kahn, Kenneth Mars, and Richard Hayden. So this movie goes on to beautifully be a lovingly tribute to the original Frankenstein with Boris Karloff. It is so spectacularly done, and of course this movie is being done in the 70s, but the fact that it is not only shot in black and white, they actually went through a lot of work to actually produce this movie in the same manner that the original had been done. There was definitely color done for all the makeup and costumes and whatnot. They just lent it to the look of black and white, which is what both Mel Brooks and Gene Wilder wanted to do. The actual studio wanted a color version of this movie released, but it was the two of them that basically said, no, this is going to be black and white no matter what you say. I could just go on and on and on talking about just, again, first of all, the loyalty to the original source material. It's so lovingly, beautifully shot to, again, emulate the feel and the look of the original Frankenstein. But to add in the wacky and brilliant comedy that both Gene Wilder and Mel Brooks brought to this screenplay, it's just such a wonder to witness. We have characters that know they're in a comedy. Marty Feldman is constantly breaking the fourth wall, being the representation of the audience in this movie. Gene Wilder is in a serious movie and plays it up beautifully. Terry Garr is just a delight to watch, and you cannot say too much about both Madeline Kahn and Cloris Leachman's performances. The two of them, while completely opposite characters, just so beautifully represent just such great archetype characters. Peter Boyle as the creature is just a dream to witness. Not being able to say very much for a good portion of his performance. And it's just, there's so many memorable moments. Not only the comedy, but again, the mood of this movie is so lovingly put together. This movie has such influence to stuff come afterwards. Least of which is inspiring Steven Tyler to write a song based on a comedic delivery of a line in a train station between Igor and Froderick. Again, I could sit here for an hour and just talk about this movie, but it was such fun watching it yet again. I mean, I always enjoy this movie. And like I said, it's near and dear to my heart as one of my early favorites that not only combines two things that I love, classic horror and comedy, it just melds these two together to the perfect example of what that should be. And it's when Frederick and Inga, who are Gene Wilder and Terry Garr, get married at the end of the movie, which happens to be May 2nd, 1974, which is an hour and 41 minutes into this hour and 46-minute movie. And when it came to the Academy Awards for that particular year, it ended up getting nominated for Best Sound and Best Adapted Screenplay. Just in case you're wondering, that would be Star Wars #1 and An American Werewolf in London #2. And as it is the 3rd of May, we are going to be watching A Matter of Life and Death from 1946, directed by Michael Power and Emmerich Pressburger, and starring David Niven. So when I first read the title that I was going to be watching for this particular movie, I was unsure of its existence. I thought it might have been sort of like a different type of story and whatnot, but to begin with, no idea what this movie is. Fan of David Niven's work, that sort of thing, but I'm totally aware of this particular movie. With that being said, as I had previously mentioned, not only does this movie star David Niven, but it also stars Kim Hunter, Roger Livesey, Richard Attenborough, Joan Maud, Marcus Goring, Raymond Massey, and Abraham Sofair. So the movie centers around the events that occur after British pilot Peter Carter, played by David Niven, is returning from a bombing mission over Germany. His plane is very heavily damaged, and he has commanded that his, unfortunately, living fellow airmen to abandon the soon-to-be crashing plane. In a last-ditch effort, Peter ends up contacting an American WAC named June, who is Kim Hunter, as he basically states his end of his mission and what's going on, and they have a bit of a connection at the last minute in his life, but he decides to bail out of his plane rather than going down in flames. Unfortunately, he jumps without a parachute, only to find himself wash up on the nearby beach. However, the movie decides to take a little bit of a twist, and we then have a sequence, mind you, in black and white for these particular sequences, where in heaven, it turns out that Peter is missing from his supposed arrival in heaven. Subsequently, back on Earth, Peter ends up meeting up with June. They end up falling in love. But a representative from heaven has to come down and try and bring Peter back. This is Conductor 71, played by Marius Goring, as an over-the-top, very flamboyant Frenchman. And throughout the movie, Peter has to deal with the sequences of both heaven wanting him back and him wanting to stay with June. And we basically jump back and forth where it ends up turning into a sort of courtroom drama, which comes down to following the laws of the universe as compared to the laws of love. Upon their second day together, both Peter and June, that is, Peter ends up meeting Dr. Reeves, a close friend of June's, played by Roger Livesley, who, from his examination and diagnosis of Peter, believes that he has some sort of neurological condition, but allows Peter to play upon what he believes is the fantasy. That all happens on May the 3rd, 1945, which is about 32 minutes into this hour and 44-minute movie. And as it is May the 4th be with you, today we are going to be watching The Messenger, the story of Joan of Arc, from 1999, directed by Luc Besson and starring Milla Jovovich. So to begin with, at the time that this movie was coming out, a friend of mine who is a huge fan of Milla Jovovich, she was so excited to see this movie, and there was no doubt that I wasn't going to see a Milla and Luc Besson movie in the theaters and all that, and so I'm pretty sure we actually saw it opening day. A bunch of us went to go see it and really enjoyed seeing it, and have watched this movie a few times over the past little while. Just one other thing, I didn't remember it actually being like as long as this movie was. I had always thought it was much shorter, but hey, I just watched the movie and it is as long as it actually is. And as I had just previously mentioned, not only does this movie star Milla Jovovich, but it also stars Dustin Hoffman, Faye Dunaway, John Malkovich, Tetsuki Karo, Vincent Cassel, and Richard Riding. So this is a gloriously over-the-top, very stylized, gorgeously shot telling of the life of Joan of Arc from her early days as a child, having several confessions a day at church, talking about hearing voices, up until her obvious demise, as we know how her story rolls out. But it is so beautifully shot. Luc Besson does a fantastic job of capturing an era visually. We have our lead of Milla Jovovich is captivating as she goes through all the stages of the life of Joan, obviously except for the child version. But she is surrounded by such fantastic cast members. All of the men that work under her lead are so wonderfully fleshed out, and when we have names like John Malkovich and Faye Dunaway, you just know you have a fantastic job. Costumes are fantastic. The stunts are really cool. There is a lot of people used in a lot of these things, because again, we're dealing with a time prior to digital effects. So when you see thousands of people on a field, there are thousands of people on a field. Now, obviously the numbers aren't that much, but the example is that instead of like having 20 and then duplicating them all over the place, you actually have the amount of people that you actually see. And sadly, the life of Jean is not as straightforward as it could be. It starts off with a happy life, confessing, like I said, 4 times a day at church. Unfortunately, the English attack her village, and bad things happen to her family members, one particular. And as she grows up, she sends like several letters to the Dauphin Charles, which is John Malkovich, stating that she is a messenger of God and whatnot. Eventually, he allows her an audience, and as he disguises himself, she is able to pick out him from the crowd, and she ends up telling her about the visions and his future status because of what she claims is the voice of God telling her. Eventually, she's given command of an army, and as the conquest goes through, Charles does become king, and once he reaches that position, they sort of distance themselves from Joan and her conquests, and eventually falling where she gets captured by the English and then tried and executed. During an early point in her conquest with her armies, she had suggested an attack on Torlise, but the next day, which is May 4th, 1429, the army actually attacks St. Loups without her, and is in retreat when Joan appears and ends up turning them around, eventually turning it into a successful capture. But she is also, at the time, shot by an arrow as well. And this is about an hour and 3 minutes into this 2-hour and 28-minute movie. And as it is the 5th of March, this is going to be The Right Stuff from 1983, directed by Philip Kaufman and starring Sam Shepard. So to begin with, this is one of those perfect examples of big screen blockbuster movies, huge cast, great visual effects. And again, we're dealing with early 80s, so it's even more of an experience going to the theater at the time to see this. Mind you, I did not see it in the theater until I didn't actually see the movie actually in a theater at all. My first viewing, I believe, must have been on one of, again, one of those cable networks that was showed movies just like HBO, either First Choice or Super Channel, whatever it was at the time. And then, again, I believe seeing it later on DVD, where I get to see the actual widescreen version of it, because up until then it was, square screens. You get a full screen version, which basically cuts off two ends of your rectangular view. So that being said, not only does this movie star Sam Shepard, but it also stars Scott Glenn, Ed Harris, Dennis Quaid, Fred Ward, Barbara Hershey, Kim Stanley, and Levon Helm. Now, what I had just mentioned is just like 1/4 of the amount of names that are involved in this movie. A lot of the great thing about this is there's a lot of huge names involved with this movie that were just coming into their notoriety at the time. It's just really cool to recognize voices before they even come on screen. Like at one point, Harry Shearer and Jeff Goldblum are doing scouting at this test pilot facility, and you actually hear their voices before you see them on screen, and it's like, I know those voices. So it's a movie that's just packed like that. Now, of course, we're dealing with actual real-world history, the whole entire Mercury problem as the Americans drive to put the first man into space, the space race as it is between them and the Soviets. And it's just a wonderful examination of the time and era that this comes into. Because, of course, we're dealing with technology that is like 30 years prior to the date of this actual movie coming out. Even more so from today's point of view. But it is so cool to understand the era from the visuals of and the attitudes. Everyone brings their own personality forward, which is amazing for such a huge cast to be able to do that. Mind you, you do have an extended length of a regular movie to do it, but it is a really enjoyable watch. I mean, do yourself a favor, even if you have a slight passing interest in space exploration. This is one of those movies to watch. And after months and months of training and the selection of the core crew that will be part of the actual Mercury program, it's actually Scott Glenn, played by Alan Shepard. It is actually Alan Shepard, played by Scott Glenn, who is launched into space on May 5th, 1961, which is an hour and 46 minutes into this 3-hour and 13-minute movie. And when it came to the Academy Awards for that particular year, it actually ended up winning for Best Sound Editing, Best Film Editing, Best Music Original Score, and Best Sound. It also ended up getting nominated for Best Actor in a Supporting Role for Sam Shepard, Best Art Direction, Best Cinematography, and Best Picture. And as it is the 6th of May, we are watching Wall Street from 1987, directed by Oliver Stone and starring Michael Douglas. So at the time when this movie was coming out, it was almost kind of impossible to escape the reality of the production of this movie. Not only are we having the names of Oliver Stone and Michael Douglas coming together, but the pairing of a movie that contains both Charlie and Martin Sheen as well is something that was big on the entertainment programming for quite a while. And to once it's released and all that sort of thing, it actually proved that it was definitely worth the wait. I myself did not see this movie in the theaters, and I don't believe I actually saw this movie until, again, like I keep mentioning, those HBO Canadian channels of either Super Channel or First Choice. I have to eventually figure out which one of those that was in my area, but that was definitely when I did see that movie. And over the years, I maybe have seen it maybe less than a handful of times, so it was kind of interesting getting back to watching this movie once more. And like I just mentioned, not only does this movie star Michael Douglas, but also, like I said, stars Charlie Sheen, Daryl Hannah, Martin Sheen, John C. McGinley, Terrence Stamp, Hal Holbrook, and Sean Young. So at the base of this movie, it is a perfect reflection upon the greed and desire of the 80s. Big business, stockbroker system and all that at the time. Just over-the-top indulgence of luxury and accumulation of wealth for no other reason than to make sure you have a bigger bank account than that guy next to you. We follow Charlie Sheen's character of Bud Fox as he makes his way into the realm of people around the creme de la creme of the stock industry of Gordon Gekko, played wonderfully by Michael Douglas. And he goes through the trials and tribulations, and this is Bud himself doing this, as he starts to make his way up the ladder to get into the good graces of Mr. Gekko, and just the indulgence of luxury and what he actually has to do to try and sustain that. And then eventually he's take a turn. He then turns upon his mentor, trying to save his father's job, who is one of the gentlemen working at the airline of Blue Star that becomes the central focus of the stock trading for a good portion of it. His father, Carl Fox, being portrayed by Martin Sheen. And again, this movie deals with a fantastic collection of actors that Oliver Stone constantly does throughout his productions. This is a very Oliver Stone style looking movie. I mean, this is textbook an Oliver Stone movie to begin with, but the cast is just littered with faces that either at the time are new-ish to the industry, or like Oliver Stone likes to do, he loves to grab those classic actors, like bringing in Hal Holbrook or a Terrence Stamp to finish this off. After 90 plus episodes of dealing with a podcast devoted to the Return of the Living Dead, it was fantastic to see James Karen on the screen again for a different role other than his poor Frank from the Return of the Living Dead. But again, it's the way that this movie is structured so strongly that it is a wonderful window into a interesting time in history. And it's very early in the movie when we find out it is Gordon Gekko's birthday, which just happens to be May 6th, 1985. And that is about 13 minutes into this 2-hour and 6-minute movie. And when it came to the Academy Awards of that particular year, it ended up winning for Best Actor for Michael Douglas. All right, so on that note, we're going to wrap up this particular episode and look off into tomorrow to see what we're going to be seeing for the 7th of May, and that is going to be Immortal Beloved from 1994. So until next time, go see a movie. This has been A Year of Movies, a Planet Geek production. Please be sure to subscribe, download, comment, share, rate, and review. Once again, another thanks to Ivan Walters for his book, A Year of Movies, 365 films to watch on the day they happened. Look for it online or at your local bookstore. Follow Planet Geek Productions on all of our social media through Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, Tumblr, and Letterboxd, search for Planet Geek Productions. On X, former Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky, search for Planet Geek Pod. You can also reach out to us through email at planetgeekpod@gmail.com. Once again, thanks for tuning in, and until next time, go see a movie.